So you just went out and bought all these fancy lures, and you're either not getting bit as much as you wanted to, or you're losing fish. I'm gonna solve all those problems for you right now. Alright guys, I got a variety of lures laid out for us. We're going to be modding all of these today. So we're going to start with what I think is the most interesting mod, and probably one you haven't heard of. If you have heard of it, throw it down in the comments down below because I'm just curious. That is the Lipless crank mod. These are infamous for losing fish, and a lot of it has to do with how big and flat-sided they are. They tend to get kind of kinked up on the bass, and the hooks come out, and they're just hard to land fish with. I'm going to show you guys a trick to keep that from happening. What I have tied up here is just the treble hook that originally came off this lure, just to a little short leader, just to show you guys how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread mine through the bottom and then back through the top. Okay, so now we have our leader or main line, however you're fishing, going through the bottom loop and through the top loop. And you tie it to your treble hook at the bottom, so that is now free floating. So what's gonna happen, you don't even need to worry about the back hook. If you want, you can put a swivel on here and put the back hook on, and that'll give it a little bit of rotational movement. That way it's not going to throw it. But I'm telling you guys, I've used it like this. It works well. What ends up happening is you're going to be reeling it in. The fish takes it. Boom. Fish is hooked. And this crankbait can now float across the line without having any issues. And the bass isn't going to be able to throw it because it's hooked solely on this treble hook. So you can add swivels to your hooks. That way they're able to rotate around a little bit better. You can also bend these hooks in, but I'm telling you guys, this is a tried and true method. It actually works very well. Don't be scared of just having the one treble hook on here. This is the one oftentimes I end up getting hooked up on anyways. You're not gonna lose fish at the rate you would have had you not done this. Let me know if you guys try it and if it works for you. Alright guys, so the next mod I'm going to show you is a relatively simple one you probably already know, but I want to stress the importance of it. So when you're fishing a spinnerbait, a lot of times you'll get short strikes or you'll have the fish miss it, and a lot of that has to do with all the flash that's back here, and I think what ends up happening is they strike at the flash, they miss the hook, whatever the case is. I'm going to show you a way to fix that. These are the 6 cents spinnerbait trailer hooks. I really like these ones personally. I also use their wacky hooks quite often, and they're fairly cheap, so that's always a positive. If you guys don't know the way you're going to do this, they have this little pad on them back here, this like little rubber gasket, I don't know what you want to call it. Alright, so what you want is for the hook to be facing downward like this. You're going to drive the main hook of the spinnerbait through that rubber gasket. Some of them are a little tough. There we go. Alright, and you're going to bring it down to where it's sitting relatively flat. It can be bending down a little bit like that. So now when that fish misses the main hook, he's going to get caught on this one. I guarantee you guys this is going to increase your hookup ratio tenfold. Alright guys, so the next one I'm going to show you is a couple of different jig mods. When you're fishing a jig and you're not getting bit very often, a lot of the times it could be because your presentation is just too big. A lot of these skirts, as you can see on this one, this is a prime example, they're really, really big, and when these are in the water, they're fanning out. When you get bit, it's usually a good fish. Sometimes we're just looking for numbers or we're just not getting bit at all, and it could be a primary place where you normally fish a jig and you're just not getting bit. So I'm going to show you guys a couple of things we can do to fix that problem. What I like to do is lay it out flat on the table and kind of get all these little strands together, and then I'm going to cut all of these off just past the hook. So we're going to go ahead and grab the group of them right about there. I'm going to take a pair of scissors and we're just going to start snipping. Alright, and then you can kind of clean it up, the little ones that you miss. So now we have more of a finesse style jig that's a little bit smaller. And the nice thing about it is you still have your original head, your original hook, everything. You still have the same weight, same color. You're just downsizing it a little bit, and that works pretty well. The next thing that I like to do with jigs, and I do this with all of my jigs, this one isn't terrible, but a lot of these weed guards go way over the top, and while it's nice for not getting hung up, it can mess up your hookup ratio. On top of that, they get really stiff. Sometimes what I like to do is just take them and fan them out a little bit and spread that stuff out, because it's still gonna penetrate through the weed guard, but we also need to trim it down. So what I try to do is get it just barely past the end of the hook. So we're just gonna take a look at it, and that should be a good spot right there. And again, just kind of trim it up as you need to. Like I said, this one wasn't horrible, but I like it to basically sit just at the end of the hook right there. And look at that pass through, super easy. That definitely increases my hookup ratio with jigs quite a bit. And you're just gonna get bit more in general with a smaller presentation like this, rather than having a huge skirt that's just fanned out all over the place. All right guys, so the next one I'm gonna show you is for frogs. This is one of my favorite lures to fish. This is just the old cheap frog from Academy Sports, the H20X. I just bought a little pack of them to kind of stock up for the spring season. So what we're going to do is we're going to trim down these legs. So I've noticed that when you trim down these legs, you get a lot less short strikes, kind of what we were talking about with the spinnerbait. And then also I'll have little fish and bluegill just kind of like blowing up on these, and it just gets kind of irritating because that's not what I'm fishing for. And also bass will miss it, and I think what happens is they blow up actually on the legs and not on the body of the frog itself. So what we're going to do is trim those down. The way that I like to do this is, once again, lay it flat on the table. You'll see where they're lifted up. Let's see if we can get a better angle on that. Where they're kind of lifted up right here, I'll trim just past where it starts to touch the table. So we're just going to go ahead and mark it and grab them, and we'll try to get the bulk of it. Oh, that wasn't a very good trim. There we go. I'm going to have fun cleaning up all this excess later. So now we have these nice and short. You still want them to be able to touch the water. I just don't want them fanned out all the way back here. So that increases hookup ratio, and it gives you a smaller presentation. I also feel like you catch more fish on them that way. The next thing that we're going to do with this frog is we're going to boil it. So a lot of these frogs, and again, this one actually isn't horrible, but they'll come out of the box really, really stiff. And it actually, you'll hear people talk about breaking in frogs, like you have to fish them for a while. And what's happening is that this plastic or rubber is starting to wear down a little bit, and they become soft. So a way to speed that process up is to actually boil this, similar to the way if you played football or any combat sport and you had to boil your mouth guard and fit it to your teeth. It's very similar to that. So we're going to go ahead and throw this in boiling water for just about 1 minute and 30 seconds. That's about how long I spend doing it. And then we're going to take it out, let it cool. And while it's cooling, we're just going to kind of press down on it a little bit. And then you'll notice a significant difference in how hard this plastic is. It's going to soften up quite a bit. So then when the fish bites down on it, these hooks expose a lot easier. All right, guys, it's about 10 minutes later, so I dried it off real good, and it's probably hard to tell on camera because I was already pressing on it pretty hard earlier, but this is a lot softer now, like way softer. And surprisingly enough, a lot of the cheap ones, you'll kind of start to lose a little bit of color when you do that, which you're going to lose color when you're fishing anyways. What you're mainly concerned with is the color on the bottom, because that's what the fish is seeing. This one didn't lose any color, so I was actually surprised about that, and these little strands held up pretty well. So honestly, I think if you are on a budget and you want to go pick up some of these frogs from Academy, they were super cheap. It's probably worth the buy. So we'll go ahead and put this one down and move on to the next thing. All right, guys, so the next thing we're going to talk about is Senkos, stick baits, anything that you want to add color to. As you can see, this is a Yum Dinger that I bought that has the Chartreuse tip on it. You can do that. You can just buy things that have Chartreuse on them. There are going to be times where you're fishing just a regular old green pumpkin. This has some extra color flakes in it, but it's a green pumpkin. You're going to be fishing these and want that little flash on there, and maybe you don't have any Yum Dingers. I don't have any of that dip right now with me. I'm going to link it for you guys in the description down below so you know what I'm talking about. And there's also markers, but essentially what you're doing is you're just coloring the end of your bait and giving it a little bit of flash. So when I've noticed that work really well is when bluegill are spawning or there's a lot of perch around. They get that really bright yellow on their bellies, and I think that's what that chartreuse is really representing in these colors on the end. You don't need much. Just basically do exactly what this Yumdinger has on here. You're just going to do not even a quarter of the Senko. You can go a little bit more and experiment with you if you want, but really I think this is all that's necessary. And I swear by this color. You guys have seen me use it a million times. The green pumpkin with a chartreuse tip just simply gets bit. All right, guys, so we're going to move on to the last modification. You might notice that this jerkbait does not have the back hook on it. You might also notice that this popper does, but it has something added to it. And it's this flash that's on the back of it. This feathery fur and the flash that it has. You guys can see that good. It's like a chartreuse green color. A lot of the time when you add stuff like this to it, it just gives that little bit of oomph that you need to entice that fish to bite. I've noticed it really works well on poppers and on jerkbaits. This is a Usuri jerkbait. Actually, I think this is an inshore jerkbait that I've had for a really long time. I really like this. I've caught bass on it too, but that's besides the point. I'm going to show you guys how to add that flash. Now, this step does take a little bit of skill. It's a little bit of a learning curve, but you can do it with some really simple supplies that you can find at a fly shop or Bass Pro, wherever you are, and it's not very hard to learn. I'm going to show you guys exactly how to do it right now. All right, guys, so these are the basic supplies that you're going to need. The first thing you're going to need is some sort of fur or feather. So hackle feathers will work well. Buck's fur will work well. This is kip's tail. You can find any of this stuff at a fly shop. If you go to Bass Pro to their, what is it called? To the White River fly shop. You can buy all of this stuff here. Really, you just want it to look exactly like what this popper looks like right here. Just a little bit of feathering on the end of it. You're going to need that. You're also going to want some flash. You can buy this stuff on Amazon as well, by the way. That's probably the easiest way to do it. But if you want to see stuff in person, I'm big on buying stuff in person. Definitely go in and just take a look at it. Even talk to the guy at the fly shop and he'll tell you exactly what you need. This is just flash. They're little, you know, strands that have some flash in them. This is a chartreuse. The other thing you're going to need is some head cement. This is what we use in fly tying. I tie flies, by the way, if you guys didn't know that. This is what we use in fly tying to secure the threading on the end, the whip finish. And it just makes the flies last a lot longer, and it's going to do the same thing for your feather that you're adding to the end of your lure. So the next thing that you're going to need, this is called a bobbin. It is what holds the thread spool so that you can apply the thread to the hook really easily. If you don't have this, it will be a nightmare, so definitely pick one of these up. This is also something that you can purchase on Amazon or in the fly shop. And the last thing that is not a necessity, but it is really handy, and that is a whip finishing tool. That's going to allow you to tie the final knot in this thread. That's going to keep it all together. Not anything you really need. You can tie the knot by hand, but this makes it a lot easier. And there's a ton of videos online that teach you how to use this, and it takes like 2 minutes to learn. All right, guys, so I have a fly tying vise. You can do this without a vise, but it's going to be very difficult. If you can find a way, if you don't have one of these and you don't want to buy it just for this, to somehow get the hook in a secure position where it's easy for you to work on it, that'll make it a lot easier for you. That's exactly what this vise does. We're going to take some of this kip's tail out, and we're just going to kind of bunch it up. You don't want to do too much, but just about the same amount as what's on this popper here. So that looks like it's probably enough. And so what I like to do is I kind of twist this stuff together, and it makes it a little bit easier to hold it in place. And we're going to go ahead and snip that, and then we can just set that aside for now. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to add a little bit of thread to this hook. So if you guys can see, the way I'm doing this is I'm just laying the thread across, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlap. Be careful for the hooks here, by the way. I'm going to overlap on that initial piece that I laid down. Okay, so now we have our thread just hanging. What we're going to do is we're going to take that kip's tail and we're going to apply it to this hook. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just try to spread it around the shank real good. And what we're going to do is we're going to start towards where the trebles are coming in at, and we're going to wrap back towards the eyelet of the hook. And go ahead and throw a nice hefty base. You don't want to pull too hard on this thread because it will cause it to break. However, you do want to get this nice and tight because this is what's holding everything on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few strands of this flash. You don't need too much of it. You can leave it longer while you're working on it and trim it at the end. We're going to do the same thing with the kip's tail. And we're just going to throw some of this on here. You can do this prior to putting a whole lot of the thread on there in the last step that we just did, but I kind of like to have it on the outside like that. That's just personal preference, completely up to you. It's going to work fine either way. And then we're just going to wrap back up towards the shank of the hook. Okay, so now we're at the step where we're going to tie that final knot. So again, this is called a whip finish. The way we're going to do this with the tool is we're going to pull the thread towards us. That first hook right here, we're going to hook down on the thread. We're going to wrap around this back piece here, just like that. I know this is probably hard for you guys to see. That thread is really small. But there's a little divot in here. That's what we just wrapped around. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap over, give myself some slack here. We're going to wrap over that initial thread that we just made. We're going to do that about 5 different times. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push down until that pops off. And then we're going to pull tight. There we go. And we have a finished whip finish. We're going to go ahead and trim up this back section here. And you're just going to trim this to whatever length you like. Alright guys, and so the very last step to this is to add a little bit of head cement. What I do is I use Q-tips. So you're just going to dip your Q-tip in there, and then we're just going to dab this. You don't need much. It actually kind of spreads out on its own. And we're just going to let that dry, and that's going to make this knot and all this thread like one nice hard piece, and it's going to keep it from fraying or coming loose. Alright guys, and now you can see our final product, which looks very similar to our popper. And that is going to help get you bites. I know it doesn't seem like that's a big difference, but if there's anything I've learned about fishing, it's that the little things matter, and they do make a huge difference. Alrighty guys, so there you have it. Those are my top lure modifications that are going to help you catch more fish and increase your hookup ratio. If you guys enjoyed this video, let me know down in the comments below. And also, if there's anything that you would like me to cover when it comes to lure modifications, or anything that you do that I didn't include in this video, one, I want to know for my knowledge because I want to catch more fish, and also I want the general public watching this channel to be able to have that information. So please share it with me down below. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Appreciate it.